Okay, so today we're diving into something a little different. Not just a movie itself, but like a reaction, a pretty strong reaction actually, to a movie.
Yeah, let's just say.
A brand new, big budget sci-fi action film.
In the review we've got, well, let's just say it doesn't hold back.
Yeah, this isn't just like someone saying, oh yeah, I saw it, it was fine. We are going deep on one person's like very strong feelings about this movie. A $320 million Netflix film. From the Russo brothers, no less. Now, those guys who did those huge Avengers.
Oh, yeah. Big names.
Right. They even brought back their Avengers writing team. Christopher Marcus, Stephen McFeely. So you've got like this powerhouse team taking on this sci-fi world created by this artist, Simon Stålenhag, starring Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt. I mean, it sounds like on paper this thing's going to be amazing, right? 2 hours long.
It does. It really does. Like, just the setup alone is intriguing, which is why what the reviewer says right at the beginning is kind of surprising.
They're like, hey, just so you know, this is going to be an ugly opinion. But then they do this thing. They give the filmmakers some props. You know, Hollywood's all about the same old IPs these days, the sequels and reboots and all that. So they respect that someone's at least trying something, you know, original.
I see. Yeah, it's like acknowledging the effort, even if the end result maybe didn't live up to it. And that kind of connects to something they say early on about how so many movies these days just lack soul. Like, they're made by people who are, well, just doing their jobs, clocking in, clocking out. And the result is just like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this hope, right? Like, maybe the electric state will be different. But then, well, here's the big question. And this is something I thought of you immediately when I read this review, because you always see those deeper layers and things. The reviewer's saying that even though the movie tries to be original, it ends up kinda not. It falls back on cliches and borrows a ton from the very IP it seems like it's trying to avoid.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. It's like they're trying to do something new, but also playing it safe at the same time, almost contradicting themselves.
Exactly. That push and pull. It's like at the core of what makes this opinion so, as I said, ugly. What do you make of that challenge? Like, genuinely trying to be original, but still working within, you know, all the familiar stuff of that genre.
Oh, man. That is such a fascinating problem, isn't it? It's like you've got all these tools, these tropes of science fiction that are meant to let your imagination run wild, but then they also kind of box you in, pull you back towards the same old ideas.
It's a tricky balance for sure.
Yeah, and you have to think, with these huge budget films, there's so much pressure to make something that feels both new and familiar. They don't want to freak people out by being too different, you know? So maybe that leads to leaning on what's already worked before.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so let's get specific. One of the first things the reviewer jumps on is the setting. The movie takes place in like a post-apocalyptic 90s. And apparently, in this 90s, there was a robot uprising.
Okay, hold on. A robot uprising in the 90s.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who actually lived through the 90s is like, wait, what? And the reviewer definitely does not let that slide.
I bet not. What's interesting, though, is why that bugs them so much. It's not just like they're being picky about historical accuracy. They argue that because this, like, made-up history never actually happened, it makes the stakes in the movie feel lower, you know, less real. Like, they literally say, nothing matters because none of this really happened, which, when you think about it, is kind of deep.
It is. It's not about being historically accurate just for the sake of it. It's about how that accuracy or lack of it actually affects how we connect with the story emotionally.
Exactly. Like, a war buy-in to a story's world, even if it's totally fictional, depends on some grounding in what we recognize as, you know, possible.
All right. And the reviewer even has a solution. They say just set the movie 5 years in the future. Suddenly a robot uprising feels a lot more plausible. Like, oh yeah, that could happen, you know?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, how important is that sense of believability, even in sci-fi, for a story to really work?
Oh, I think it's huge, for sure, especially for getting us immersed in that world and actually caring what happens. Even if the story's totally out there have got to be rules and internal logic that makes sense. You can't just contradict our basic reality without a really good reason. Setting it in the near future, like they suggested, it keeps that feeling of this could be us, which is what often makes sci-fi so powerful.
I like that. Keeps us on the edge of our seats a bit. Okay, so then the reviewer gets into the tone of the movie. And this seems to be another big issue. They feel like the film just completely misses what Simon Stålenhag's art is about, which they describe as having this like darkness and melancholy to it.
Right.
But the movie is this, you know, plucky, fun action adventure.
Yeah, adapting anything visual, especially art, into a movie, it's got to be so tough. A still image can give you a feeling, this mood, but film has to move and needs plot, so translating that.
Super tricky.
Totally. And what the reviewer's saying is that this tonal shift, it's like a betrayal. Like the movie is at war with itself, trying to be this light, fun thing, when the source material is anything but.
Yeah, and that brings up this constant question with adaptations. How faithful do you have to be? Especially with something that has such a specific look, a certain feel, like this artist's work. Where's the line between honoring that and making something new for a different medium?
Right, it's a balance, and there's no easy answer. But when they say the film is fighting itself, that really hits home. If you change the core elements, like the mood, the atmosphere, people who love the original might feel like you totally missed the point. Or even worse, like you ruined it. It also makes you think, who is this adaptation even for? The fans? Or like the general audience? That's probably going to determine how close you stick to the source.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so now, buckle up, because here's where the reviewer gets really fired up. They go off on this whole thing about how much the movie just borrows, straight up steals from other famous films. We're talking E.T., Transformers, Guardians of the Galaxy, even The Phantom Menace. They even call out one shot that they say is exactly the same as a shot from E.T.
Wow. Okay, they are not holding back. And that kind of brings up this whole difference between, inspiration, which is natural in any creative field, and what they're calling out. Basically just taking stuff. They have this analogy about how a time machine shouldn't be a car, to avoid being compared to Back to the Future. Their point is, the electric state isn't just broadly inspired by sci-fi, it's like lifting specific things from other sci-fi movies, which, makes it feel less original, more like a Frankenstein's monster of familiar bits.
I know you catch those little homages and nods in films all the time. Where do you draw the line? When does inspiration become something else, something less cool?
I mean, inspiration should be the jumping off point. You use it to fuel your own vision, right? Yeah. But when you're just recreating iconic scenes or even plot points from other stuff and not in a way that's like commenting on them or twisting them, it just feels cheap, and it can actually hurt those borrowed elements because people immediately think of the original, which is usually better anyway. And I think that's what they're getting at. It's not that the movie uses sci-fi tropes, it's that it's like directly copying those really specific moments and ideas.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if the filmmakers are doing it on purpose as a wink to the audience, or if they just ran out of their own ideas.
Right.
Okay, so the review then gets into some nitty-gritty plot stuff and some character issues. One that really stands out is this robot who claims to be Michelle's brother. But apparently this robot can only speak in these pre-programmed sound bites. Well, like every other robot in the movie seems to talk perfectly normally, and the reviewer come on, that's just lazy writing.
Oh yeah, I can see that. It's like when a story takes these shortcuts just to keep things moving, but it ends up making things feel fake. Like, if this robot brother could actually talk, it would solve the main conflict way too fast. So they make him, mute, essentially, just to drag things out.
That's exactly what the reviewer is saying. Come up with something more organic, people.
Yeah, it feels forced, doesn't it?
Totally. Then there's the whole post-apocalyptic journey thing. The reviewer points out that the world actually seems pretty okay. Things are running, people are going about their day. It's not this wasteland. They even compare it to that movie, A Quiet Place, where the danger feels real, resources are scarce and every step you take could be your last. They're basically saying the stakes in the electric state just don't feel high enough.
Right. If you're going to say this is post-apocalypse, you got to show us what that means. The world's got to reflect that event, the damage, the way people live has got to change. If it was like business as usual, then who cares, right? The journey, the struggle, it all falls flat.
Exactly. Okay, and then there's the relationship, or lack of relationship, between Michelle, the main character, and Keats, this truck driver guy. The reviewer felt like there was just nothing there. No real connection, no tension, nothing to make them interesting as a pair. They even compare them to, get this, Deadpool and Wolverine. That iconic duo. They've got this whole history. They love to hate each other. It's so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
And that comparison just highlights how important those central relationships are, right? To actually make us care about a movie.
Oh, for sure. Especially if your story hinges on the characters. The relationships are what it's all about. Why should we care what happens to these people if they don't have some kind of connection to pull us in? And that could be anything, conflict, shared goals, some kind of emotional arc. But if Michelle and Keats could basically be on separate adventures and nothing would change, that's a problem.
Yeah, missed opportunity for sure. Okay, so then the reviewer shifts gears a bit and starts talking about the Russo brothers themselves. And they're like, look, these guys made some great stuff, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But what happened, they point to Captain America, The Winter Soldier, those Avengers movies, all successes. But then they list off these other films, The Gray Man, Cherry, Citadel, and they see the quality just keeps going down, with the Electric State being, in their opinion, the worst of the bunch.
It's always kind of fascinating, isn't it? Seeing how a filmmaker's career goes. Like, do they get better with each film? Do they get more freedom after they've had hits? Or does the pressure change? It's hard to say.
It's super complex, for sure. And then the reviewer does this thing, they offer an alternative. They're like, okay, so you wanted to do something original with sci-fi, right? Well, why not adapt this book, Roadside Picnic, this 1972 novel, which they describe as having this dark, post-apocalyptic vibe, and thematically it connects with that artist's work we talked about.
Roadside Picnic. I've heard of that. It's supposed to be pretty intense.
Yeah, and the reviewer's saying even if you had less money to throw around, you could have made a much better film with that story. Stronger characters, deeper themes, just more impact overall. And they point out that the Electric State, even with all its millions, didn't have any truly memorable visuals. Which, when you think about it,
It's kind of saying, hey, stories and characters, that's what matters, not just explosions and CGI.
right, sometimes the simpler approach is better,
Absolutely. Focus on the heart of the story.
So in the end, the reviewer comes back to those main criticisms, right? That messed up setting, the tone being all wrong, all that borrowing from other movies, and the characters and plot just falling flat.
Yeah, it's almost like they're circling back to that irony from the start. A movie that wants to be original, but ends up being a mashup of things we've already seen.
And I think that's what makes this review so interesting, and maybe even a little ugly, as they said. It points to how hard it is to do something truly new, especially in a genre like sci-fi that's already got so many stories, so many expectations.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So to wrap up our little deep dive into this very passionate take on the Electric State, it makes you think, right, what does make a great movie? Is it sticking to the source material, taking risks with the story, writing characters we truly care about? Or is this a magic combo of all of that? Something to ponder next time you're picking a movie.
For sure. Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Always a pleasure.